What's up, y'all? Let's dive headfirst into today's stories. I first got to college my freshman year and met the dorm leader, RA, at most schools. Like most colleges, the dorm leader was the upperclassman that lived in the dorms and monitored the freshman halls. My dorm leader's name was Julio, fake name BTW, and at first, he seemed like a nice dude that minded his own business. He talked about how he would stay out of everyone's business if we would stay out of his. Also, he tried to be the cool dorm leader and always mentioned to me about how he drank tons of alcohol his freshman year in the dorms. He gave off the impression he really didn't care if we ever drank in our dorm rooms, but to just keep it on the low if we did. I really didn't drink much at all, but I appreciated the fact he seemed pretty normal and didn't try to rat on kids. During the last week of October of my freshman year of college, I had one of the hardest weeks of my academic career. I was a biochemistry major taking some pretty tough classes and had 3 exams that week. At the end of the week, a friend I had recently made down the hall invited me to his dorm room to watch an upcoming NBA game. As we were watching the game, he had a bottle of vodka and gave some to the guys in the dorm. Being a naive and stupid freshman kid just trying to make some friends, I took one shot of vodka and continued to watch the game. As we're watching the game, one of the guys in the dorm spills a bottle of soda and rushes to the bathroom to grab some paper towels. As he walks out of the dorm room, Julio walked by and noticed the bottle of vodka. He laughed and said something of the sorts of "I remember when I was a freshman, haha, just try and keep it down." We thanked him and told him to have a good night. It seemed like a normal conversation and nothing out of the ordinary. 30 minutes later we hear a knock on the door and 2 policemen showed up with breathalyzers. They told us they had received a complaint from Julio about underage drinking and a party being thrown in the dorm room. Remember, it was 3 guys watching a Lakers game on a Thursday night at 8 p.m. I ended up getting a minor in consumption charge for blowing a .02, had to do 20 hours community service, a reflection journal, and appear to the Judicial Affairs Center at my college about my supposed drinking problem. I'm not blaming the officer for giving me a ticket, but I was pretty upset that Julio, who always talked about getting poop-faced freshman year in the dorm, called the police right after he essentially gave us the okay for the night. A few weeks later I see Julio and straight up asked him why he decided to rat me out. Specifically, I asked why he didn't just tell me to head back to my dorm if he had a problem with the alcohol instead of calling the police right after our conversation. He responds word for word with "You made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." After that incident, I never really talked to him, but he always tried to be buddy-buddy when he saw me in the hallway. Anyway, I eventually leave the dorms and move off campus for my sophomore year. I had decided to rush a fraternity my freshman year and ended up meeting some really nice guys. I have never been the fraternity type, but I went to a smaller college where fraternities are a lot different than most places. During the second semester of my sophomore year, my fraternity was taking a new pledge class. One day I received a text from Julio saying one of the guys pledging your fraternity has been caught dealing alcohol to another freshman in the dorms. I thought I would let you know. Turns out Julio was the dorm leader for a freshman pledging my fraternity and ratted him out to Judicial Affairs as well. Thinking the term dealing alcohol was the lamest/funniest thing I have ever heard, I sent that to our fraternity GroupMe and everyone laughed about it. About a week later, that kid pledging our fraternity came up to me asking about the message I received from Julio. Essentially, a pretty similar thing happened to him like what happened to me. Julio found out he had given another kid in the dorm a bottle of wine and reported it to the police. This kid ended up getting a minor in possession and had to speak with Judicial Affairs. This is where the story gets hilarious. In his meeting with Judicial Affairs, the kid pledging our fraternity told the Judicial Affairs guy that his dorm leader, Julio was now a senior at this point, had texted me about the charges pending against him. Apparently, it's a huge violation to discuss pending charges against a freshman in your dorm to a third party. The Judicial Affairs guy told him that if he could prove Julio was discussing this charge with a third party, aka me, he would receive severe sanctions. Basically, if I sent that text to the Judicial Affairs people, Julio would be in a crapload of trouble, so I sent the text that night to the Judicial Affairs people. After that, I didn't hear anything about what happened to Julio and had honestly forgotten about it. However, nearing the end of the school year in my sophomore year, I saw Julio at the dining hall and came up to speak to me. He tells me a story about how he knows I was the one that ratted him to Judicial Affairs, how he ended up getting fired from his dorm leader position, lost the scholarship money his dorm leader job provided him, and overall how poopy his life has been since he got fired. After going through his entire sob story, he asked me, "Why did you do that?" This could have been handled completely differently. I didn't have to get fired and I could have kept my scholarship money. I look at him dead in the eye for what seemed like 30 seconds and say, "Julio, you made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." About a year ago I was working part-time as a server and needed to look for some extra work as the busy season had slowed down and I needed to make more consistent money. I wasn't looking incredibly seriously as me and my girlfriend lived in a condo owned by her parents and I had virtually no bills. One night me and my girlfriend go to get dinner from relatively well-known pizza chain near us. Inside they had help wanted flyers practically spilling onto the floor. As I had multiple years of food service under my belt, I figured I wouldn't be an awful choice for some extra part-time hours. I mentioned to the manager that I was interested and would drop off an application the next day as I was dressed to go pick up pizza. Which means a dirty t-shirt with my dog's hair on it, sweatpants and flip-flops. Obviously not interview attire. We take our pizza and leave and the manager actually follows me into the parking lot practically begging for me to just do the interview with him. I thought it was weird but didn't think anything else of it, ended up getting hired. Now to give some backstory, when I say I have food service experience I mean I have years of management experience all the way up to assist store manager for multiple fast food restaurants. The reason I didn't apply for a higher level job was, as I said, money wasn't really a huge issue for me, and at the time I was just coasting and saving money to move out of state. After starting it became very clear that my boss, who we will call Howard, had absolutely zero idea what he was doing. It started off with the restaurant having zero daily, weekly, or monthly cleaning duties, which if you worked fast food you know is an absolute necessity. He would consistently not have the answers to questions I had and direct me to other employees. Simple questions like which side of the oven a specific pizza goes in. And would smoke a cigarette every 20 minutes. The fact that the store had been open less than a year and was already in disarray speaks to how things were being run. I would come to find out he was a janitor, or custodial engineer as he liked to say, previously and had zero food service experience, and somehow got hired to be the general manager. I saw this as an opportunity for me to get paid a little bit more for doing the same work I would inevitably end up doing. I offered to be his assistant manager as he had no one in his store who wanted to do it and he had already asked me previously. On the condition that it stay part-time because I really liked my serving job and didn't want to give it up. I told him that I would spend the time teaching him the behind-the-scenes stuff that fast food training doesn't put in manuals or online tests. How to effectively make schedules, how to make weekly cleaning charts, weekly build to orders for shipments, things like that. Then when busy season at the other job started he could hire a full-time assistant. He delightfully agreed. Me and Howard were the only two managers at that store with 2 drivers and 5 employees other than that. He would schedule me 2 open to close shifts in a row on his 2 days off so he could keep them every week, and would justify it by saying he worked open to closes on the days I wasn't there since a manager has to be there to handle any of the cash from the safe. He never worked a single double shift. I worked this for a couple of weeks and within that time literally every single employee except for me, Howard and a driver we will call Jeff had quit and we had hired new people. Me and Jeff got along swimmingly as we both were stoners into the same music and fairly laid back. We also loved to talk poop about Howard. He was also Howard's next door neighbor and sold him some weed on occasion. So he had all the dirt all the time. It became clear to me that there was some money issue going on somewhere as we were getting way more tips at the front counter from credit cards on reports than cash going into the tip bag for employees. This wasn't the easiest catch since he would save the tips up for 2 weeks to distribute them to employees on the week's episode of payday. However, with the store being an unorganized mess, it was hard to know if it was money being stolen or just simply numbers being put into the system incorrectly. One particular night I was closing the store and was having some issues balancing the drawers and the numbers weren't adding up. I called Howard, who picked up with a hiccup and a slew of slurred words. I explained to him the problem I was having and he tried to walk me through it but was either too drunk or more likely just didn't know the answer to my question. I told him I would call his boss, who I had met a couple times and had mentioned if I ever had questions to call him. Howard immediately freaked out and said, "Don't do that, they don't want anyone to know how to work the numbers on the POS, point of sale, not piece of poop, otherwise they will try and steal money." Knowing that was an asinine response, I said that makes zero sense. How am I supposed to fix the problem if I don't know how it works? Then he said the words that started the snowball that would come crashing down on his whole life. He told me, "Listen, you are asking too many questions about the cash, it makes you look really suspicious like you're the one stealing money." I told him whatever, I would leave everything the way it was and he could fix it the next morning. Or try at least. I had to be careful because in food service if stealing money even comes into question most places will just fire you since they can hire any zit-covered kid to replace you. Because of this and just my morals, really being called a thief is the one thing I do not stand for. So I hatched a plan with Jeff, who sided completely with me and had his suspicions for a while about him. Jeff knew that he was an alcoholic who could never turn down a night at the karaoke bar. Now Howard was interesting because with how incompetent he was, he still tried to be the biggest people pleaser I've ever met. But in like a lonely and desperate way. He had practically begged me multiple times for us to go drinking together or to come smoke with me at my house. Keep in mind I am 24 and he was 32 with a wife and 2 kids at home. We decided to both invite him out to a night of karaoke the night before he had a big meeting with his boss and the VP of training for the whole company. Of course, since me and Jeff both invited him, he couldn't say no. I actually ended up having a good time that night. Not because Howard was good company. Because my plan involved me buying Howard at least 7 Jaeger bombs, a double shot of Patron and a lot of beer, and I had to drink a fair share to not look suspicious. What a birder, I know. My girlfriend, who was ding for us, dropped him off at home around 5:30 in the morning after a rather long smoke session at my house, suggested by me of course. Needless to say, he did not show up to work the next day. He called and told his boss, who was already at the store, that his kid needed to go to the hospital the night before and that he was still in the ER. They called me around 11 a.m. to come in and cover his shift. When I got there, I asked Howard's boss why he called out, and when he told me the reason, I said, "Really? Well, I stopped by that karaoke bar last night for a few hours and he was there. I wonder why he took him in and not his wife?" And showed him a picture of an obviously fricked up Howard and myself. They ended up firing Howard within 30 minutes and had offered me his position, as I had more experience than him anyways, and was already practically running the store and had completely taken over training new employees. I would have been perfectly content with him getting fired. I never imagined to have been offered his job. I was blown away. However, I still didn't accept the job as I didn't want stress level the job came with. They say the best gifts keep giving, well, so do the best revenge plots. Howard had his wife kick him out, asked for a divorce and full custody of his kids. He went over to Jeff's house and sobbed and cried, cursing me for ruining his life just so I could take his job from him. I would have given anything to have been a fly on the wall to see the look on his face when Jeff told him that I didn't take it and quit the job shortly after. What did you think? What would you have done differently? Share your opinions in the comments. And if you enjoyed the stories, slap that like and subscribe button for more of them, and don't forget to support the original writers with an upvote. Links are in the description. Peace out, and catch you tomorrow.